Elvis showed up at the White House with a loaded gun. That's not even the strangest part of this story. He wanted something from Nixon that no celebrity had ever asked for before. The president agreed to meet him in the Oval Office. What happened next was caught on film. At the 0:34 mark, Elvis makes a move that leaves Nixon speechless. The footage was hidden for years. When people finally saw it, they couldn't believe their eyes. This wasn't just two famous men meeting. This was something much darker. Elvis Presley was born at 4:35 in the morning on January 8, 1935, in a tiny two-room house at 306 Elvis Presley Drive in East Tupelo, Mississippi. The house was just 400 square feet. His father, Vernon, built it by hand. There was no plumbing inside. His mother, Gladys, was 22, working at a sewing factory. Vernon was only 17, trying to find work in cotton fields or logging for 50 cents a day. In 1938, Vernon forged a $4 check so they could eat. He was arrested and spent 8 months in jail. That time crushed the family. Elvis clung to his mother from then on, and she became his whole world. The Presleys moved 9 times around Tupelo, often landing in government housing. At one point, they survived on beans and cornbread for weeks. In that same year, the house nearly burned down, and Elvis, only 3, never forgot it. He feared fire for the rest of his life. These years of moving, hunger, and fear left a mark on him that never went away. But what made it even harder was something no one saw. Elvis was not born alone. His identical twin brother, Jesse Garon Presley, was stillborn just 35 minutes before him. Jesse was wrapped in newspaper and buried in an unmarked grave at Priceville Cemetery. That grief never left the family. Elvis grew up talking to a brother who wasn't there, sensing his presence when he was alone. He believed Jesse's spirit stayed with him. His mother, Gladys, never fully recovered. She cried often and held Elvis tighter than most mothers did. That loss followed him into adulthood. His sadness, his spiritual hunger, even the way he moved on stage. It all began with the silence left behind by a missing twin. For decades, Jesse's grave went unnoticed, forgotten until it was found again in the 1980s. But Elvis had always carried it inside him. By the time he was 3, Elvis was already drawn to music. He sat through long, loud church services at the First Assembly of God in Tupelo, where the music was full of clapping, stomping, and wild hallelujahs. That church brought together sounds from both white and black traditions, blending gospel with blues, and it hit young Elvis straight in the heart. He loved the raw power in the hymns. Songs like Old Rugged Cross stuck in his memory. The beat, the emotion, the feeling of it all. It was in his bones before he even knew what music could become. These tent revivals gave him his first stage and his first audience. He wasn't polished. He was real. And it stuck with him. At 10 years old, on October 3, 1945, Elvis got his first taste of performing in front of strangers. He stood at the Mississippi-Alabama Fair Talent Show and sang Old Shep. He didn't win. He came in 5th. They gave him $5 and some free tickets. But some kids laughed at him. His hair was too long. His clothes looked poor and homemade. That sting of being mocked never left him. But he didn't quit. That one song, sung on a simple wooden stage in Tupelo, would change him forever. Even then, the way he poured emotion into a song was different. The stage made him feel alive. Everything shifted again in late 1948, when the Presleys moved to Memphis. Elvis was 13. Vernon got a job at a paint factory for $1.37 an hour. It wasn't much. They moved into a crowded housing project called Lauderdale Courts. They were still poor, but Memphis had something Tupelo didn't. It had music pouring from every window and alley. On Beale Street, legends like B.B. King and Rufus Thomas were shaking the city. Elvis snuck out late at night just to hear them. Blues, gospel, country, it all mixed together. For the first time, he started to see how music could be a way out. School was hard. Elvis enrolled at Humes High School in 1949. He was shy and quiet. His sideburns were long. His clothes looked different. Kids threw fruit at him and called him names. He stuttered when he was nervous. He was the water boy for the football team and made wooden lamps in shop class to earn money for the family. But slowly, music gave him confidence. He joined the choir. He kept singing. He kept listening. And he kept dreaming. On his 11th birthday, he asked for a rifle. His mother bought him a guitar instead. It cost $6.95 at Tupelo hardware store. At first, he cried. He didn't want it. But she handed it to him and said, "Try it." That plain guitar became everything. He learned chords by watching others and practicing alone. He copied country singers on the radio. He listened to yodels, practiced for hours, and even sang at church. That guitar was his ticket out. He took it everywhere. Even when he didn't have money, he had that guitar. In the summer of 1952, he worked at Precision Tool Company for 75 cents an hour. It was sweaty, repetitive work. He also ushered at Loew's State Theater, cleaning floors and watching cowboy movies. He loved Gene Autry. He mimicked the outfits and the swagger. Music was always on his mind. The next year, in July 1953, he saved up $3.98 to record a song for his mother. He walked into Sun Studio and sang "My Happiness." It wasn't meant for fame, it was just for love. But that small act changed everything. On July 5, 1954, Elvis went back to Sun Records. He was 19. Sam Phillips was looking for something new, something that could blend country and rhythm and blues. At first, the session was slow. Nothing clicked. Then, late at night, Elvis started fooling around with a blues song called "That's All Right, Mama." He played it fast, loose, and full of energy. It didn't sound like anything anyone had heard. Sam knew instantly. He recorded it. On July 19, 1954, it was released. A Memphis DJ played it 14 times in one night. The phones rang off the hook. People wanted more. When asked how old he was, Elvis said 19. It was true, but in that moment, he stopped being a kid. That night, rock and roll was born. He formed a band with Scotty Moore and Bill Black. They called themselves the Blue Moon Boys. They played tiny clubs like the Eagle's Nest in Memphis for $18 a show. Elvis moved like no one else. He shook his hips, bent his knees, threw his whole body into the beat. Some thought it was vulgar. One critic called him a dose of castor oil. But teenagers saw something different. They saw freedom, rebellion, something alive. The more adults complained, the more kids cheered. In 1955, Elvis's song "Mystery Train" hit big on regional charts. That's when RCA Victor stepped in. They offered $35,000 for his contract, the highest amount ever paid for a regional act. Sam Phillips, struggling to keep his studio afloat, accepted the offer. It broke his heart, but he needed the money. Elvis's final Sun session that August included "Milk Cow Blues Boogie." It was raw and full of soul. That last song at Sun was the end of something small and the start of something massive. In late 1955, Elvis Presley was still a rising name from the South, but everything changed on November 20th, when RCA Victor signed him for $40,000, the highest advance ever given to a new artist. Just 7 weeks later, on January 10, 1956, he was in a Nashville studio cutting a strange, echo-filled track called "Heartbreak Hotel." It sounded different, raw, and haunted. And when it was released on January 27th, it sold 300,000 copies in the first week. That one song climbed to number 1 on the pop, country, and R&B charts, which almost never happened back then. By April, it was certified gold with over 1 million sold. And Elvis wasn't just famous, he was unstoppable. The next day, after the single dropped, on January 28th, Elvis made his first national TV appearance on CBS's Dorsey Brothers stage show. He wore a pink suit and shook his legs like he didn't care who was watching. The band behind him laughed so hard they nearly fell off the stage. But 1.5 million people tuned in, twice the show's normal audience. It wasn't just the music, it was the way he moved, the energy that made adults uncomfortable. Ed Sullivan refused to book him, saying Elvis was unfit for family viewing. But every insult just made teenagers love him more. He showed up 5 more times on that show, and each time the ratings went up. Parents were worried. Pastors preached. Elvis smiled. Then came June 5, 1956, the Milton Berle Show. Elvis sang Hound Dog, but this time he didn't hold a guitar. He moved, hard. His hips took over the screen, and the crowd went wild. But the next day, the New York Times called it a striptease with the zipper side up. They said he couldn't even sing. Headlines warned parents to beware. Critics said he was corrupting the youth. Religious groups wanted him off the air. That's when they started calling him Elvis the Pelvis. The name stuck. So did the fear. That night drew a line between old America and the new one rising. By March 19, 1957, Elvis had turned fame into fortress. He bought Graceland for $125,000. It had 13 acres, a stone wall, and enough distance from the screaming fans who now camped outside day and night. He added a pool, then a jungle room with waterfalls and shag carpet. Letters flooded in by the thousands. Teenagers scaled walls just to glimpse his shadow. Police were stationed outside. Graceland wasn't just a home. It was a shrine built while the king was still alive. On September 9, 1956, Elvis finally appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show. The same Ed Sullivan who once said no now gave him top billing. That night, 82% of American TVs were tuned in, the highest viewership in U.S. history at the time. To calm the outrage, they only showed him from the waist up. Didn't matter. Record sales exploded. Parents feared him, preachers raged, but the youth had chosen their king. That moment wasn't just a performance, it was a takeover. Elvis stepped into Hollywood next. In August 1956, he filmed Love Me Tender, a Civil War Western shot, in just 27 days. He played Clint Reno, didn't do much acting, sang only 4 songs, and still pulled in $4.5 million. Hal Wallace at Paramount saw it as a formula. They'd keep the movies fast and simple. Elvis would sing a bit, charm a girl, and leave the story behind. Critics rolled their eyes. Theaters sold out. Then came Jailhouse Rock in 1957. Elvis played Vince Everett, a convict turned rock star. He danced through the prison in tight black pants and snarled at the camera. That number, choreographed in 2 days, became iconic. The movie made $4 million behind the scenes. He grew close to co-star Judy Tyler. Just weeks after filming ended, she died in a car crash. She was 24. Elvis locked himself in his room and didn't come out for days. The spotlight had started to burn. By 1960, Elvis was earning $1 million per film. Over 13 years, he starred in 31 movies. Most followed the same pattern, like G.I. Blues, where he played Tulsa McLean, a singing tank driver chasing dancers around Germany. That film alone brought in $4.3 million. The plots were thin. The music mattered more. Studios wanted hits, not art. And Elvis kept delivering. There was one exception, King Creole in 1958. Filmed in New Orleans and directed by Michael Curtis, it gave Elvis a real role. He played Danny Fisher, a street punk with a broken heart. He studied acting, watched Brando, and even learned to play the guitar left-handed for a scene. This time, critics praised him. The New York Times called it his best work. It made $4.5 million. But the studio didn't want another serious Elvis. They wanted Jukebox Elvis, the one that never said no. Off-screen, the cracks were showing. In 1957, while watching a Robert Mitchum movie, Elvis shot out the TV in a fit of anger and accidentally injured a cameraman nearby. His inner circle, called the Memphis Mafia, swelled. Friends, assistants, enablers. They brought pills disguised as vitamins, kept the parties going for days. Elvis called them his family. They made sure the king had whatever he wanted. And slowly, they helped him self-destruct. Then, the draft came. On March 24, 1958, Elvis was sworn into the Army. No shortcuts. He joined a tank battalion at Fort Hood, Texas. He trained for 6 months, logging 1,500 hours of driving time. He fired live rounds, made sergeant by February 1960. He bunked with the men, made jokes, drove jeeps, and followed orders. He even refused special privileges. But underneath the uniform, he was breaking. In August 1958, his mother Gladys fell sick. Elvis begged for leave. He was denied at first. Furious, he threatened to go AWOL. A high-ranking officer stepped in, and Elvis drove 22 hours to Memphis. Gladys died the next day. She was only 46. He collapsed at her funeral, wept until he passed out. They gave him 5 extra days to grieve. The death certificate said heart attack, but her liver was destroyed. Elvis never recovered. That's when the Army doctors gave him Dexedrine. It made the pain easier to ignore. A year later, in West Germany, Elvis met a 14-year-old American girl named Priscilla Beaulieu. He was 24. She was quiet, lonely, homesick. He said she reminded him of his mother. They talked for hours, and he sent her pink teddy bears and love letters in pink envelopes. Her parents resisted. He showed up in uniform, promised respect, and charmed them. The romance went long distance after he came home. She kept writing. He kept promising. In 1967, he married her. In July 1968, Elvis Presley walked into NBC's Burbank studios wearing black leather and holding nothing but a guitar. For 3 days, from July 27 to 29, he poured everything he had left into what would become his comeback special. He laughed, sweated, and sang through Guitar Man and If I Can Dream, surrounded by a small crowd that cheered like old friends. When it aired that December, 42 million people watched. The show was raw, unfiltered Elvis, the kind of performance that reminded the world why they fell in love with him in the first place. It was his rebirth after years of forgettable Hollywood films, and it earned 2 Emmys. Producer Steve Binder pushed him to drop the movie star act and just sing. The gamble worked. America saw a man fighting to reclaim himself, and when the lights faded, his legend burned brighter than ever. That fire carried him to Las Vegas. On January 26, 1969, he opened at the International Hotel, playing to 2,200 people every night. The room was electric. He moved fast, grinning, sweating, his white bell-bottom jumpsuit glowing under the spotlights. He sang Polk Salad Annie, mixed new songs with old ones, and cracked jokes with fans who screamed like it was 1956 again. The residency made over $1 million in its first month, but the pace was brutal. 4 shows a week strained his voice and body. Still, he couldn't stop. The applause pulled him back to life, but it also chained him to the stage. By 1970, that energy had been bottled in his live album, On Stage. It was wild and spontaneous, Elvis teasing the crowd, joking about fans throwing panties at him. Yet behind the laughter, he was angry. He fought constantly with his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, firing him more than once. Elvis wanted to take risks, try new sounds, explore his soul. Parker wanted profits and control. They were locked in a quiet war that never really ended. The world saw the smile, but offstage, Elvis felt trapped in his own empire. His health began to slip. On August 26, 1970, he collapsed mid-show, dehydrated and dazed from painkillers after knee surgery. He still got back up and finished the run. The painkillers became constant companions, along with a growing obsession with law enforcement. He collected federal badges, posed in uniforms, and saw himself as part hero, part guardian. It was pride mixed with paranoia, a man trying to control something as fame spun further out of reach. In February 1972, Priscilla Presley filed for separation. She had endured years of affairs, including one with his hairdresser, Cynthia Rex. Elvis tried to win her back, even gifting her a yacht named after her. But it couldn't mend the cracks. Their daughter, Lisa Marie, became the thread that held them together for a time. But love had turned into duty. Fame had swallowed the family, and no gift could save it. Just a year later, on January 14, 1973, Elvis stood on stage at the Honolulu International Center in a white jumpsuit, glittering with a sunburst cape. His Aloha from Hawaii concert was broadcast live via satellite to over 40 countries, reaching around 1.5 billion people. It was the first event of its kind, a global moment of pride and spectacle. Yet behind the brilliance, he was suffering. Cortisone injections for glaucoma had swollen him to 250 pounds. He smiled through pain, his voice soaring through An American Trilogy and My Way. And when it ended, the world called him immortal. But the man behind the rhinestones was exhausted. In 1972, during a drug-fueled night in Denver, he snapped. Witnesses say he karate-chopped a toilet in half, flushed $1,000 in jewelry down it, and demanded to see FBI credentials from the Colorado governor. Barbiturates had warped his mind into delusion. It wasn't just a bad night, it was the unraveling of someone who once moved the world with a song. His final serious film, Change of Habit, in 1969, showed him trying to act again, playing a doctor who falls for a nun, portrayed by Mary Tyler Moore. The movie tried to be bold, tackling issues like heroin addiction and autism, but it stumbled into controversy. Elvis struggled with the serious tone, and critics dismissed the film. It was the end of his Hollywood dream, and the failure haunted him. By October 9, 1973, his divorce from Priscilla was official. She received $725,000 and joint custody of Lisa Marie. Court testimony painted a heartbreaking picture. Elvis avoided intimacy after childbirth, tangled in his guilt and his fixation on purity that tied back to his mother. Fame had turned him into an idol, but it had also stripped him of how to love. In 1976, the king was falling apart. He was taking Placidil and other sedatives in terrifying quantities, consuming around 10,000 calories a day. His body bloated, his voice fading. Dr. George Nicopolis kept feeding him prescriptions, suitcases filled with pills labeled under fake names. He'd forget lyrics, mumble on stage, yet still the crowds came. They didn't see the shakes, the hallucinations, the memory gaps. They just saw Elvis, smiling. But the private life was darker than most ever knew. When Elvis met Priscilla in Germany in 1959, she was 14 and he was 24. In her book Elvis and Me, she described how he gave her amphetamines and sedatives to keep her awake for long nights, even crushing dexedrine into her drinks. After his death, a nurse found a suitcase of Polaroids, some of underage girls. Priscilla later said she felt brainwashed, torn between fear, devotion, and control. It was a truth few wanted to confront about the man the world worshipped. His temper, grew worse. On March 19, 1975, he fired a .357 Magnum at his fiancée Ginger Alden's Cadillac during an argument, the bullet missing her by inches. He then slashed all the tires on the Graceland grounds so no one could leave. Police said nothing. Inside the mansion, everyone walked on eggshells. Elvis called it love. Others called it danger. By 1976, he was consuming about 10,000 pills a year. Friends told stories of him passing out face first into food, sometimes into a bowl of soup, and being revived with ice cubes. Linda Thompson, one of his partners, once had to drag him unconscious from the bathroom. They feared he wouldn't wake up one day, and in August 1977, that day came. He was 42. His gun obsession mirrored his mind's decline. Over 40 weapons, 6,000 rounds of ammunition, and constant paranoia filled Graceland. He shot at TVs, called celebrities witches, and once blasted his own resort lights because he thought spies were watching. Visitors were told to carry guns. The king who once sang about love was now haunted by shadows only he could see. At 6:30 in the morning on December 21, 1970, Elvis Presley stepped out into the cold Washington air wearing a deep purple velvet suit, a giant gold belt buckle, and amber-tinted sunglasses with EP on the bridge. He wasn't there for a concert. He wasn't there for press. He was there for Richard Nixon, and no one knew he was coming. He handed a 6-page letter, scrawled on American Airlines stationery, to the confused guard at the northwest gate of the White House. In it, he explained that he, Elvis Presley, wanted to help the country by becoming a federal agent at large. He said he could fight drug culture, take down hippies, and stop the Black Panthers. In his hand, he carried a glass display case holding a loaded Colt .45 with silver bullets, a gift for the President of the United States. The Secret Service took it instantly. Elvis checked into the Washington Hotel using the name John Burroughs and waited. Hours passed. Then, just after noon, the door finally opened. At exactly 12:30 p.m., a White House aide led him into the Oval Office. President Nixon was waiting. The two men couldn't have looked more different. Nixon in a stiff gray suit, Elvis in a velvet cape and silky white shirt, wide open to his chest. He came in holding a stack of police badges, souvenirs from California, Tennessee, and Colorado. He told Nixon he could reach America's youth better than any politician, that his music could change hearts in ways no speech ever could. He suddenly started bashing the Beatles, calling them anti-American, said they made millions here, and then trashed the country from overseas. Nixon nodded along, surprised. Then Elvis showed him a few karate moves, right there on the rug. They talked about how neither of them got enough credit in America. Two unlikely outsiders bonding in the most powerful room in the country. A White House photographer quietly captured the moment their hands met in a stiff handshake, standing under American flags. That photo would later become the most requested image in the entire National Archives. More than the Bill of Rights, more than the Constitution. The President and the King side by side, one in gray wool, one in velvet, forever frozen in a single frame. At the end of the meeting, Nixon gave him what he'd asked for, a personalized badge from the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, tucked inside a silver case. It had Elvis's name engraved on it. 10 days later, Nixon sent a thank you letter. In it, he acknowledged the pistol Elvis had tried to give him that morning. The world wasn't supposed to know any of this. The meeting was a secret. Elvis was trying to rebuild his image. Nixon's popularity was sinking. Both had something to lose. But more than a year later, on January 27, 1972, the Washington Post broke the story. Suddenly, the meeting became legend. People couldn't believe it had actually happened. Two films were made about it. First, a 1997 Showtime mockumentary, Elvis Meets Nixon. Then, in 2016, Elvis and Nixon was released in theaters, starring Michael Shannon and Kevin Spacey. The world laughed at the absurdity, but few people saw the pain behind it, because the badge hadn't saved Elvis. On August 16, 1977, he died at just 42. The official cause was cardiac arrhythmia, but the deeper truth was harder to ignore. His blood contained 14 different drugs, near-toxic levels of codeine, morphine, and placidil. His heart was swollen, his body bloated. The Memphis Press Scimitar reported he had likely passed out and suffocated under his own weight. He had collapsed alone in his bathroom, while the badge from Nixon sat somewhere in his Graceland collection.